Hey folks, Kostya here, and today I'm going to be reviewing Technical Decision Making in Chess by Grandmaster Boris Gelfand. Obviously, Gelfand needs very little introduction. He's a world-class player, former world championship contender, and this is the third book in the series on decision making. I also have the first two books in the series, Positional Decision Making in Chess, as well as dynamic decision making. And overall, I really enjoyed this series, so I kind of want to talk about the series as a whole and then get into exactly what I liked and didn't like about technical decision making. This was actually our chosen book for the Dojo book club, which I ran with my co-pilot Grandmaster Jesse Cry. And actually, if you want to see us really break down this book chapter by chapter, going through all the games and notes, you can find those videos here on our YouTube channel, so make sure to look for those. So overall, I think this series is quite brilliant. These are some of the best chess books that have come out in the last couple of years. In particular, the first one, Positional Decision Making, was very well received just all over the place. It won Book of the Year from the English Chess Federation, and virtually every reviewer that I saw just really loved and raved about the book. And I personally really enjoyed it as well. So overall, I think the series is really great for high-level players. I would put the rating estimate at somewhere around 2200 plus, but it doesn't mean that lower-rated players just can't get anything out of these books. I think the books are really interesting to read overall, but I'll talk a little bit about what I would recommend for lower-rated players that are interested in this book but are not quite sure if it's the right book for them. Now, the way that this book and the previous books are laid out is that they have a list of topics on various themes, and usually Gelfand chooses his own games as a vehicle to discuss a lot of these themes and issues. And the way the books were written, it's no secret that Gelfand had a lot of help from Grandmaster GM Aagaard, who's just an incredible author in his own right. And I think the way they wrote this book is that they would sit down together, they would analyze Boris's games, and eventually Jakob would go and type up all their notes, maybe do some computer analysis, and turn that into a full package. So let's get into this book itself. And I want to actually start with the build quality, because it's actually really good. I know this is subjective, but I like the hardcover. I think the book feels really good in my hands. It's not too big, it's not too bulky. The pages feel nice. I like the font and the font size and the diagrams. Like, as far as the actual production value of this book and the previous books, I think they really nailed it. Again, this is all subjective, but I'm just giving you guys my opinion. I really enjoy just picking up and holding and working through this book. It's something you don't exactly get when you're always doing chess online. And in terms of the instructive value of the book, again, I would say that it's just really high quality. There's lots of very interesting games and notes in it, and if you're a high-level player and all you do is just play through the games and read the notes, there's no way that your understanding of chess won't improve. You're definitely going to get something out of just picking through the thoughts of such a strong and powerful player as Gelfand. I mean, the guy is truly just a genius, incredibly deep player. There's no way you're not going to get something out of the book if you just read it straight up. But let me talk a little bit about why this book was a little bit of a letdown to me and especially Jesse. And I think the main point here is that we just wanted more of a guide, more of a blueprint, how to actually make decisions. Essentially, this book started to feel like more of a collection of games. They laid out all these topics, but eventually it just became a series of Gelfand's games with his analysis, which again is really interesting and really useful, but it's not exactly the technical decision guide that we were looking for. Now, I should note that there was definitely some really high expectations for the rest of the books in this series, mainly because the first book, Positional Decision Making, was just so brilliant and so well received. But let me show you exactly what I mean by just having more of a guide or blueprint to understanding some of these topics. So this is a position that comes from the first book, Positional Decision Making, specifically on the chapter of space. And this was, I think, the favorite chapter of a lot of people that read the book, myself included, mainly because it explained this topic of space and space advantage in just a really profound and interesting way. And one of the things that I really appreciated about the first book that I didn't really get a lot of in technical decision making was just the use of these excerpts, just these little small positions with little blurbs or little notes that could really, really do wonders for our understanding of these concepts. So this was a really cool one from the chapter about having a space advantage. And ironically, this position is actually borrowed by Gelfand and Aagaard from the book Simple Chess by Michael Steen, which, based on this example, I imagine might be a really, really interesting book to look at. But Gelfand uses this position as a way to explain that a space advantage is not just about the pawns, but it's actually about the piece mobility in the position. So optically, it looks like white has a lot of space, and indeed in this position, white has quite a significant space advantage. But if we take off a couple pieces off the board, for example, this knight and this bishop, and we trade it off for one of black's knights and black's light-scored bishop, and we take this position where the pawn structure hasn't changed at all of a sudden, black is actually totally fine here, because all of black's pieces are going to have a role, something to do in the position. The bishop on g7 is obviously no longer blocked. The knight on d7 has a number of good squares to choose from, like e5 or f6 or even b6. And black's plan in this position will be to play the simple move rook b8, followed by a6 and b5. And if we go back to the previous position with more pieces on the board, well, Gelfand's point and Steen's point from Simple Chess is that with more pieces on the board, it actually becomes a lot harder for black to create any kind of significant counterplay. On rook b8 and a6, white will just play a4 and shut everything down. And so it was actually really instructive to see that the space advantage is, again, not just about the structure, but it's actually about the piece mobility. If your pieces can move around, then there's no space advantage. If your pieces are feeling very cramped and don't have a lot of squares, that means you're at a space disadvantage. And so this was just like a really simple example. There's a few more of these in the chapter on space, but I felt like this was one of the most instructive parts of the book. Just seeing these snapshots of a position with some explanation, some analysis, why this position is different to this position. To me, that was extremely valuable, and we just didn't get a lot of that in technical decision making. And although I found the games in the book really, really interesting and very interesting to go through and read through Gelfand's notes and analysis, I don't feel like I now have this like arsenal of technical tools available to me that I can access during the game. So who is this book for? Who should read this book? Well, like I mentioned, I think the series overall is really good for 2200 plus players. And if you are somewhere in the master range or higher, I would recommend you just read as much of Gelfand as you can possibly get your hands on. Because I think if you are willing to put in the work and really go through the games and go through the notes, and really play through everything, then you will extract a lot of value, even if it's not exactly presented to you in the most straightforward way. One quick note I want to mention, I know there's a lot of computer analysis in these books, and this is something that tends to be pretty polarizing. I would say in general, the authors here, they did a good job of not just throwing random computer lines at you without any kind of explanation. It wasn't perfect. There was definitely a lot of moves and a lot of lines where I wish there was more annotations and more explanations, but I feel like it was an okay balance. Again, if you're a strong player and willing to put in that work and go through the notes and struggle a bit, then by the end of it, you will definitely come out better for it. But I can definitely see how these books would be pretty overwhelming to anyone that's not in that range of like 2,000, 2,200 and up. So if you are below 2,000 and you're wondering if these books are right for you, I would say it might not be the best use of your time. But that said, the books are a really interesting read. Especially, I would recommend checking out the first one. I think this is probably going to be the most accessible one out of all three. That's Positional Decision Making in Chess. It has a lot of prose and explanation that you can certainly learn from. But then the other two books, I would be really, really cautious before picking up, because I think it just might get a little bit too advanced and a little bit too technical. If you are looking for books that offer more concrete tips and advice, how to play these kinds of positions, what to do in this kind of position when you have bishop versus knight, or when should you trade, when should you go for the end game. There's lots of books out there. This book, Simple Chess by Michael Steen, I personally haven't read it, but just based on seeing that one example and hearing it recommended over and over again, I would say that's probably a really interesting book to check out. Silman's Reassess Your Chess has tons of straightforward tips and advice. There's lots of books I've mentioned on this channel before along the similar lines. One book that I actually think is really good, I don't really plug on the channel because I kind of had a hand in producing it, is this book by Grandmaster Ramesh, Fundamental Chess, Logical Decision Making. This is a really interesting book. Ramesh is a well-known coach from India. He's taught a lot of the Indian super talents that are now out there. And I don't like plugging this book because I actually helped produce the book. I was kind of one of the editors on it, and I used to work for the publishing company. The publishing company also published my own book on the Sicilian, but I don't have any financial stake or any financial interest in the book. I don't make anything if people buy the book. So I feel like I actually should recommend it because I do think it's a very high quality book. And in this book, Ramesh talks a lot about the fundamentals of decision making, how to form a plan, what kind of pieces to exchange, how to calculate virtually everything that a tournament chess player needs to do and work on. So if you're in that club player range of like 1200 to 2000, I'll leave links to all the books I'm talking about in the description below, but I would highly encourage you to check out Ramesh's book as well. Sorry guys, that's going to wrap it up for the book review. Hopefully you found it insightful. Overall, again, I do think that the series is really great, but it just doesn't quite live up to the expectations that we all placed on it. You know, this is not going to just be a straight up blueprint of how to make technical decisions in your games. This is going to be a collection of high level games, high level analysis. And if you're willing to put in the work and go through the notes, then you'll definitely extract some benefit out of it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If there are any other books you want us to review on this channel, please let us know in the comment section below. And I should note that actually we are going to be doing another book for the Dojo Book Club. Our next book is going to be Under the Surface by Grandmaster Jan Markos. This is also from Quality Chess. This book came out just a few years ago. It's pretty recent. I read a little bit of it, and I really enjoyed what I read so far, so I'm excited to really get into it and read the whole thing. The book club is going to be starting next Wednesday, February 3rd at 5 p.m. Pacific. If you're watching this later, the book club is going to be every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, so you can come hang out and see what me and Jesse have to say about the book that week. All right, guys, hope you have a good one, and I'll catch you next time. Take care.